Okay. So, hi everyone. Today we have the founder of TXG, Ian Fraser, with us to chat a little more about his journey in club fitting and TXG, and we're going to ask him a few questions regarding club fitting. So, Ian, can you tell us a little more about yourself and your journey with TXG, how you started it?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Michelle. This is great. I mean, one of the good things that's came out from a terrible situation is the opportunity to do stuff like this.
Yeah.
I think one thing none of us have is much time when it comes to this time of year. The spring in Canada is when we all ramp up and we're all so busy. So, we can connect and kind of exchange information and ideas and hopefully all come out this situation a little bit better. So that's definitely one thing that I'm thankful for.
For sure.
So for me, I started club fitting in around 2001. So I've been doing it a long time. I turned professional at the age of 18. I went through the PGA route back in the UK, became a Class A professional, took 3 years to sort of get that qualification. And at the end of that, obviously you have a decision to make. What part of the business do you want to focus? Do you want to go down the route of being a club pro, maybe a teaching pro, and really at that point, club fitting wasn't really an option that people would think of as a viable career. It was maybe something that people would do in a window of their career, but they wouldn't make a full career out of it. And I still kind of think that that's the case today. So I love equipment. I've always loved equipment. Ever since I first started playing, I used to spend hours going through stores and looking at this driver and that driver. And, I was always fascinated by the people I would play with. Why did they have a certain club and that sort of thing? So I was definitely curious about equipment more than most. And that sort of led me into club fitting. And at that point in the early 2000s, we were starting to become more aware of things like aftermarket shafts and different things that we could do to a golf club to change its characteristics. So, I was very fortunate at that time. And then after that came along, TrackMan really is the first launch monitor that we were all aware of. There was ones previous to that, but I think TrackMan really, made launch monitor fitting and coaching, took it to the next level. So I had my first TrackMan in 2006. Which was early for that. So I was fortunate to get to work with that. And, you were able to, it was like you were given another dimension to club fit. You maybe used to see things in 2 dimensions, and then having TrackMan gave you a third dimension. So a new set of eyes to measure things with, which was amazing. So then as obviously things went on, I was working with TaylorMade at the time. But I slowly started to believe that there was more to this thing than just offering one brand. So it wasn't really in anyone's best interest to just have 14 clubs from one brand. So yeah. I would find myself at demo days and things like that when people would come to our events and they wanted maybe a set of nice forged irons. And at the time, to be honest, TaylorMade didn't really have anything like, that was as nice as Mizuno or Titleist. So I would find myself sending clients to other fitters. Go and see them, ask for this shaft, this head. I think that's probably what you're looking for. So even at that point, I was starting to develop an agnostic approach, completely brand agnostic approach to club fitting. Fast forward, I moved to Canada in 2011. Started a company over here, was with them for about 4 years. It was great. We kind of developed a great concept there, but really ultimately I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to make decisions that on the company's future and not really have to ask someone, well, what do you guys think? And then we had to get 5 people to agree to the same thing. So I enjoyed certainly having the ability to steer the ship whatever way I thought was best. So TXG was born in 2016, and here we are today.
Cool. That's a very cool history.
Yeah, I mean, when I look back at it, it's hard to believe it's almost been 2 decades that I've been club
Yeah.
fitting in some capacity. I mean, off and on. I tried my hand at being a player. I tried to play professionally. And at the time, it's probably what's led me to be, a good fitter. Is I was so technically minded. Too technically minded, to be honest. I was over analytical. My dad would always say to me, like, would you just stop thinking about it and just bloody play? So, I was always analysing everything, swings. I mean, I don't know. At that time, David Ledbetter was really the kind of top coach in the early 2000s, Butch Harmon. There was some other people, and I would study them and their players and their philosophies, and then I would go back into older, coaches and Harvey Penick, John Jacobs. Go back into all these guys, Dave Peltz. I had all the books from all these guys, and it just seemed to me like I wasn't really meant to be a player. I was meant to be in more of a coaching role, but not a coach. I never enjoyed hours upon hours of coaching, and that's what led me into club fitting.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good story of how you got to there. And for sure, like you mentioned earlier, that you work for TaylorMade and then it's like one brand. That was one of the questions that we had. Was I get a lot of questions from clients that I work with. They're like, oh, I only like one brand, so I tend to go back to it. Do you find like it's actually pretty common that most people will end up finding the best clubs with different kinds of hay, different shafts and everything?
Yeah, I would say, in all honesty, Michelle, in the course of the year, we would have less than one handful of players leave with only one brand in their bag. I would say it's common that they leave with 3 to 5 different brands in their bag. So yeah, I think even look on the professional tour, the best players in the world now are trusting multiple brands with their own games. So, there's no way, unless someone's paying you to play it and you have a good reason, play what's going to help you shoot the best score. But it's remarkable how brand loyal people are. I mean, even on the YouTube channel, when we do things like, we just done a thing called the driver bracket, where we had 10 different drivers.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and Matt would hit all the drivers. People would be like, I can't believe the TaylorMade lost yesterday. You guys aren't being fair to this brand. It's like, the numbers are the numbers. It's not our opinion. We had it was total yardage minus the total offline yardage gave us a number. It was purely a standardized test. But people were so outraged that their favorite brand would lose, which was kind of fun at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I noticed if I get a lot of people come in for their test we do the biomechanics test, and then they're like, oh, I have 2 drivers, but I like this one better because I like the brand and I got that one, but I can't hit it. And I'm like, okay, I don't know.
I know.
That's not a question for me.
Send them to Alex. That's exactly.
Yeah. So when would you say is like for amateur golfers to realize, okay, it's time to look into equipment fitting? Like, when would they like think of that in terms of like developing in the game of golf?
That's a brilliant question. Something we just discussed on the call there was using data with our clients, and we're now in an information age, and I think having systems like Arcos to obviously use and utilize, because sometimes when we analyze our own games, or maybe we don't analyze our own games, we just take the game for granted and we just go, well, I'm a 12 handicapper and that's all I'm supposed to be. But when you really dig down and analyze it, there's one part of your game that's probably quite a bit worse than a 12 handicap, and there's bits of your game that are quite a bit better than a 12 handicap. So being able to single out those parts of your game and isolate those and work on them is one of the approaches that will really help you lower your scores. I mean, Arcos, not to plug them too heavily, but it's a phenomenal platform. Their average handicap reduction for their users is 4.1 strokes. which is a lot. I mean, it's a lot of strokes to take off your game. So I think using information would be the key to be able to single out what parts aren't working. So I'd encourage everyone to do that.
Cool. So in that case, would you say, like, I know there's a common misconception that people say you don't really need the club fitted until you're like a good player. What about what would you suggest for golfers that are like mid handicappers, like 15 to 20, that are looking to get a bit better at the game, and they are practicing a lot? Would they be like important too to look at equipment from now and then, kind of thing?
Definitely. The rule of thumb is the higher your handicap, the more help you need.
Yeah.
That's the rule of thumb, isn't it? I mean, the reality is, I mean, if you take someone who's a +2 handicap, they are generally super talented or they work super hard, which means in one way, shape, or form, you could give them just about any set and they're going to figure it out because they practice enough to figure it out, or they have just enough skill that they can figure it out. You know, good players, we talk about hitting the golf ball through specific windows in flight. Generally, a player will figure out what they need to do with that golf club, how they need to swing it in order to achieve the flight that they have in their mind. Higher handicappers and sort of players who don't have as much time to dedicate to the game will not be able to do that. They'll basically just apply the swing they've got to the clubs that they use, and what that'll come out as a good or bad result. So I think the higher your handicap, generally speaking, the more you should be looking at equipment and biomechanics and coaching as avenues to improve. We have a great mutual friend in Ron Pikowski, don't we? And you know, I don't think I know a single person who squeezes more out their game than Ronnie.
He does. He like works on every single part of it.
And he analyzes it, and he has his instructors in every area that can help him, whether it's yoga, biomechanics, club fitting. He has Carson when it comes to coaching. And all of us play a little bit of our role. So Ronnie's got his team. You know, we're all Team Pikowski.
And he loves all of this.
Oh, he loves it. He absolutely loves it. But I think that he is the perfect example of someone who makes the absolute most out of his physical attributes and what he's sort of able to do. And he's one of the only golfers, I've known Ron for probably 8 years now. And he has progressively got better as you know, I've known him, which is a remarkable thing.
Yeah, no, he definitely like got noticeably a lot better since I met him 2-3 years ago now. I think 3 years ago.
We love that, don't we? Because we're looking to be on a journey with our clients.
Yeah.
None of us really want the kind of one and done sort of relationship with anyone. We don't want it to be a single exchange. We want to be with people and help them and making sure that as the process evolves, and whether that's a customer comes to me and gets an adjustment for equipment, and that means they maybe modify, you know, something that they do within their game, or go to you and all of a sudden their movement pattern changes and they can access more speed or you know, different sort of requirements for what we need to make the club do. We're all in it, you know, together, and we all complement each other in that sense.
Yeah, that's a big part that I always see. Like me growing up playing, I always had that interest in like, oh, how does the club fitting fit into everything? And then as I do this more, and now I look at it, and I notice with clients, it's like some people, just because we change something physically, it becomes so different when they like hit the ball. I notice this is with a lot of the clients I work with. And also from my personal experience from getting fitted when I was younger. So when the person have like, say, the length of their arms and the legs in proportion to the torso and the body, what I notice a lot of golfers have the wrong type of clubs that actually affect how they rotate through. how important would you say like that plays a role in club fitting?
So I lost you just towards the end of that question, Michelle. Sorry. So I got you up until and you were explaining the sizes. Sorry.
Yeah, I was saying that with golfers that like the ratio between the length of their arm to the leg and like the torso, the proportions, and how important role does that play into club fitting when it comes to the length of club?
I think that's something that has evolved in club fitting over the last few years, because I think it was always a given that someone's height would be sort of the determining factor, or the wrist to floor measurement specifically. And it was almost like static measurements were used to create sort of length recommendations. Now it's a much more dynamic process. So when we see certain dynamic tendencies, we know that we need to apply different clubs. So people who are basically early extenders, so they kind of thrust the pelvis forward, it causes them to stand up, they lift the handle, those people shorten the golf club because they pull the club inward in terms of the movement of it. So it's a tricky one as a club fitter, knowing how much to help those types of things, because ultimately we don't want to add in a fix that makes them sort of continue to make these bad movement patterns. So we have to be very mindful of when to contact Michelle. When do we need to send someone to have a screening to see, why can't you find the sweet spot of that golf club? And we're honest about that at times, and all of our guys, I hear them all doing it. There are times when we go, this is not the right time for new clubs. Doesn't matter if I give you a heavy shaft, a light shaft, an open face or a closed face, you're overriding all of these adjustments. You need to address the problem, and we need to send you to a specialist for that. So it's all dynamic motion. There's a lot of reps that go into it, pattern recognition. When you see certain people making certain moves, that's the beauty of having done this for 20 years. There's really not anything anymore that haven't seen in a fitting bay. Worked with beginners to major champions, so and everything in between. So there's definitely we're not going to come across something we're uncomfortable with.
Cool. Yeah, I did notice that. Like, I know the old way when I got fitted, they did just like the wrist to floor measure for that. And then what I noticed with some clients is that they could be very short but have very long arms, and that change everything when they rotate the body. So that's one of the things that I'm always like fascinated by.
Yeah, and I think there's a real a role for each of us to understand what all of us do, what each of us do, which is exactly what you and I are talking about, and you continue to do that with your network, and we do the same. And the more we all learn about each other's sort of skill set, I don't have to do your job, but I have to understand how your job helps the golfer, and that's obviously vice versa. Like you say, you want to know, how are the clubs going to affect this player's pattern? Because ultimately that's your big concern. How do they move? Why are they not able to rotate? Why are they not able to access, the power that they should physically be able to do? Things like that.
Yeah, it definitely all comes back in a circle.
That's exactly it. And if someone wants to get the most out of their game, that is the way to address it, isn't it? It's leave no stone unturned. And I was definitely not the most talented golfer out there, but I worked harder than any of the other people that I would play golf with, that's for sure. And I remember back in the early 2000s, I was working with a Czech institute sort of physiotherapist, and he was incredibly knowledgeable, and I was working with the best swing coaches and short game coaches. I would fly down to the south of England to work with sports psychologists, and I would do everything that I needed to do in order to be the best player I could be. Unfortunately at that time I was still in my own way when it came to being the best player I could be, but it gave me the tools to now help other people not make the same mistakes.
Yeah, no. I think all of us end up doing this, had some sort of like, we went through that path and wish someone was able to answer more to those questions, and then we
Yeah.
end up finding out going down that route.
Yeah, I mean, I bet that's the route for a lot of sort of either top instructors or
Mm,
specialists. Maybe a failed attempt by themselves, but failing is not something to be scared of. Failing just tells you what doesn't work, which gives you answers, and when you have answers, then you can move forward and try other things. So people should never be scared to fail in anything.
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, another question that I had was
Mhm.
with, now we talk about adults, but with juniors growing,
Yeah.
when is a good time to start them on fitting, and like how often do you recommend usually that they should check in to adjust or like look at the different clubs and shafts?
These are some good questions. These are some really good questions. I mean, these are some of the most sort of unanswered questions in our industry. I think at times, um, when it comes to juniors, we have to be as club fitters very very careful with how we approach this. Often their swing speed will develop faster than their sort of ability to control the weight of the golf club develops. So we have to be mindful that we can see a golfer at the age of 14, and when we see them again age 15, they may have added 10, 15 miles an hour swing speed as they've taken a growth spurt or something like that. So I first like to get golfers into custom equipment not too early, because I think there's a lot of golfers or a lot of companies who make great equipment for juniors and have great programs. I would like to start working with juniors at the age of about 13 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time parents are keen for us to work with them at like 8, 9, 10. But for me, that's generally too early to really go down the custom line. Head weights are too heavy. Even if we put lightweight shafts on them, having really light head weights is not an option. So someone like US Kids offers head weights that are 10% lighter than standard. So that's great weight savings for the player. So about 13, 14, they're about ready for custom equipment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that that's one of the questions I always get from parents as well, because
Yeah,
some of the juniors I work with, I generally notice like what you say, they grow and they have so much speed, but they cannot control the weight of the club at all at
no,
that speed that they are swinging. So a
yeah.
lot of times end up the club is like pulling them out of everything.
That's exactly their effort to try to generate sort of power and speed. It
Mhm.
compromises their movement patterns so significantly, and if
Yeah.
they continue to do that for so long, it really imprints a bad DNA on their golf swing. So I think we'd like to see juniors more often and make smaller incremental changes along the way. The other part is I would always advise parents, don't don't try to give your children equipment that they'll grow into. I don't like I don't like that one where it's like, oh well, I'm going to give them this because he'll grow into it. I mean, we specifically have a program where if a junior gets some clubs from us, this when they need to upgrade the shafts,
Yeah.
they're 50% off, and that helps offset a lot of the cost, because normally they've grown, so they need new shafts, longer shafts, and maybe slightly heavier.
Hmm.
But the heads are still great for the player. So we don't want the parents to have to pay for new clubs every 6 months. That's not ideal at all.
Hmm. Yeah, Alex did mention to me about that program, and I
Yeah,
told some of my juniors about it too, because I think that that's kind of important, especially with the ones between 13, 15, they're growing so much. It's
yeah,
like, okay, you're growing, but you don't want to try to swing a driver. I have kids where they come in with like a driver that looks really long for them.
yeah. They come in with their parents' clubs or
Yeah.
something like that, and they maybe hit it a little bit longer with it just because the club is longer in length.
Mm-hmm.
But it's certainly not ideal.
Good. What would you recommend in general? Like how many seasons that people should look into getting checked and making sure things are like still good?
I would say 3 to 5. Somewhere in the window between 3 and 5 years is a nice window. And it's actually not because I think that technology moves that fast, Michelle. I think people change in that window. I think that's often the bigger thing. So people maybe have lessons, or they have maybe gotten a little bit older, and that can be from a young person to get a little bit older. That might be from a 65-year-old to a 70-year-old. Obviously there's going to be some things that you need to address, whether it's speed loss, whether it's the clubs start to feel heavy, they get tired swinging the clubs on the back nine, and it starts to affect their performance. So I like that 3 to 5 year window for most golfers.
Cool. Yeah, that's one thing that Ronnie always mentioned about. It's like how often that he gets his clubs checked with you, making sure things are okay. And I think
Exactly.
that's like good 3 to 5 year timeline, because a lot of times I think people just go way too long.
That's right. Yeah, and then there's the opposite, isn't there? Where there's the people who are overkill,
That go
and
every 6 months.
every 6 months, and every time a new driver comes out, they're like, "Well, what about this one?" And when you say to them like, "We optimized you 6 months ago," nothing really is going to change. But they kind of just like playing the new cool products that are out there, and so it's give and take, and equipment's fun. There's no doubt about that. Having equipment and having it dialed in specifically for you, and that's just a lot of fun to use equipment that can make you do something that you've never been able to do before.
Mm-hmm. And one more question is, I know you guys have the process at TXG where like you can do like a whole full back fitting. How would you recommend people going about that? Because I know Alex mentioned doing the full back is a long process, and people often get tired in the middle of it. Like, what would you suggest to do first, second, and the order of it?
Yeah, good question. I get that one all the time as to how to prioritize it. The reality is, it's a different answer for everyone. So wherever you can get the most bang for your buck out of improvement, whether that's you take too many putts, we'll go for a putter fitting first. Generally speaking, I say to people, if you can drive the ball well and you can putt well, those two things normally hold a game together. You have to drive it well, not far, but you have to drive it well, because that we start every single hole with a driver or a 3-wood or something, an off the tee club. And if you're a bad driver of the golf ball, every single hole you're playing defense, and then it's difficult to play golf when you're always playing defensively. Whereas if that driver is a weapon for you, you're on the front foot, you're set up nicely for your second shot. So I really think for most golfers, having a driver that's really functional and optimized from an accuracy and distance standpoint, and that's not always the one that goes the furthest. A lot of people want the driver that goes the furthest, but that isn't always the one that sort of helps you most. In actual fact, when people get drivers that go the longest, they are often the most crooked for that particular player. So it's a blend of performance characteristics that we need to build in. And obviously putting as well, just being the single club you make the most strokes with. A good putter and a putting stroke and good routine can sort of make up for a lot of mistakes in the golf game.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I find sometimes people just get very overwhelmed when they think of club fitting, and they're like, "Oh, I have to do the whole back, but where do I start?" Kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of the actual sort of full bag fitting, you can split it up. You can do it on multiple days. If that's something that would suit you better. I mean, in a full bag fitting, a player's going to hit upwards of 150, maybe almost 200 shots.
Mm.
Most people aren't capable of performing well for that length of time. So I always recommend to my own sort of customers, try to split that full bag fit over 2 days.
Okay. Yeah, that makes it more sense. So
Yeah,
they're not
I
so
think so.
tired to do.
Yeah, people get more out of that, and generally speaking, they have a little bit of time to think about the first day, and then
Mm.
if people are different day to day also. So if someone maybe had a bad day the first time, we can maybe look over, that particular club again if they're swinging it a little bit better. That's
Mm.
happened on many occasions for me, especially the customers that come in to see me from out of town. Is they had a bad first day, but they have a great second day. So
Mm.
we know that's what golf is like, and there's often no rhyme or reason. It's just our sort of body rhythms. Certain days we feel better than we do other days.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Cool, cool. Okay, so to wrap this up, well, thank you a lot for your time today.
Thank you,
Thank you
Michelle. I'm
for
glad to
sharing
see you're
with us.
doing okay.
Yeah, we'll be